We have some exciting media news where fan favorite Jake Tapper has just started hosting a brand new show. He's going to prime time on CNN in the 9 o'clock hour with Jake Tapper tonight, filling the void of Chris Cuomo, who departed in that scandal involving his brother, Andrew Cuomo. So Jake Tapper is now filling that spot. And what this means is that Jake Tapper in prime time is going to be not wearing a tie. So just no tie with the suit jacket, and it's a more casual Jake Tapper. And what better way to kick off your new casual 9 p.m. hour than to engage in a Cold War monologue about Vladimir Putin? And that was what Jake Tapper did for the debut of this brand new show. So let's take a look.
Welcome to CNN Tonight. I'm Jake Tapper. Is Vladimir Putin a rational actor? Or has Vladimir Putin lost his mind? That's really the subtext of all the conversations about whether the Russian president is actually willing to drive humanity to the brink of a nuclear disaster. I bet it's keeping President Biden up at night. How about you? How are you sleeping ever since President Biden used the word Armageddon? In just a moment, I'll ask President Biden outright how close he thinks we really are to the brink and what options are on the table in our exclusive interview. Because as Biden noted, in Ukraine, Putin's choices, his options are narrowing.
We will defend our land by all means at our disposal. We will do everything to ensure the security of our people.
So breaking out our Putin to English, English to Putin dictionary here, when he says we will defend our land, what he means by our land is the 18% of Ukraine that he just declared part of Russia. And by our people, he means the Ukrainians who have taken up arms to stop him. And when he says, by all means at our disposal, all means, that's rhetoric that's gone nuclear.
So I think Jake made a mistake there when he says that Putin means our people as being Ukrainians fighting him. I think Putin actually means Russians. I don't think he means he's taking responsibility for all Ukraine, especially those who are fighting Russia. So I don't get where Jake drew that conclusion. And this comment that Jake is making about Putin threatening nuclear weapons, it's based on a misinterpretation of Putin's words. And now Putin certainly is bellicose, but he didn't actually explicitly threaten to use nuclear weapons. He talked about using all weapons at our disposal. And specifically, he talked about Russia having weapons systems that the U.S. doesn't. And by that, he's not talking about nuclear weapons. He's talking about these hypersonic missiles that Russia has developed in recent years. And the fact remains that Russia has a nuclear doctrine, which Putin was just reinforcing, which is that Russia will use nuclear weapons only in the event of defending itself from a nuclear attack launched by someone else, or if there is an existential threat to the territory of Russia. Existential, meaning that like Russia could be destroyed if it doesn't use nuclear weapons.
Right.
That's what Putin was just reasserting when he talked about Russia's nuclear doctrine. The U.S. actually has looser restrictions on the use of nuclear weapons. They'll allow it in extreme circumstances if U.S. interests are threatened, which is actually different than Russia's. And Biden had hinted that he was going to revoke the U.S. policy and actually pledge no first use, but he didn't. He actually just reaffirmed the pre-existing policy. So Jake is not quite getting that about nuclear rhetoric here.
I think Jake needs to maybe trade in or upgrade his Putin to English dictionary that he brags that he has.
Definitely needs to upgrade. Yes.
Not sure it's working.
Yeah. But also notice in this monologue how many times he'll like switch camera angles just to add a little flavor. As if they're supposed to make it more exciting.
Right.
His neocon rant. So let's hear a little bit more.
I think he needs more of a plunging neckline, honestly, if he wants to add more excitement.
The U.S. is the only country in the world to have used nuclear weapons on 2 occasions, resulting in the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which reminds me, they have created a precedent.
A friendly reminder. So how serious is Putin about using a nuclear weapon? Well, President Biden, he sure seems to be taking it seriously. Quote, Putin's not joking when he talks about potential use of tactical nuclear weapons or biological or chemical weapons, because His military is, you might say, significantly underperforming, Biden said a few days ago. Quote, I don't think there's any such thing as the ability to easily use a tactical nuclear weapon and not end up with Armageddon, unquote.
And again, the way Biden characterized what Putin said is false. Putin has never threatened to use tactical nuclear weapons and never threatened to use biological or chemical weapons. Biden is just making that up. And Jake Tapper, instead of fact checking Biden, is repeating the lie. It's very dangerous rhetoric. And I don't know why Biden said that, but it's really irresponsible for someone just to repeat it as if it's true when Putin never said that. I mean, go and find Putin saying we're going to use biological or chemical weapons, or we might. He's never said it. So Jake is just repeating Biden's gaffe. And that makes this moment all the more dangerous, because when you have rhetoric like this, from the centers of power of a nuclear power like the US, you're making it just a lot more difficult for tensions to calm down. And in that situation, bad things can happen.
Right. It's funny. It's like the worst of both worlds, because they're both attributing a nuclear threat where it doesn't really exist, but they're also acting as if a nuclear threat is not that big of a deal. Because, of course, if there is a nuclear threat, you know what you'd want to have there? You'd want to have some negotiation.
Exactly, which is nowhere. It's not even a forethought in Jake Tapper's monologue.
Right.
I don't think he even mentions the prospects of negotiations once, although he does ask Biden about it in his interview.
It's not surprising, Aaron, that Biden is being less than truthful here. I mean, interestingly enough, the New York Times, which is hardly a Biden bashing publication, has a piece out this week. It's called Biden's Storyteller in Chief Spins Yarns That Often Unravel. President Biden has been unable to break himself of the habit of embellishing narratives to weave a political identity. And they go through kind of example after example of him just lying about things. It's pretty damning. So this is pretty on brand for Biden.
Let's hear a bit more of this monologue.
And look, if Putin talking about nukes sounds scary to us, imagine how it sounds to the Ukrainians. Here's President Zelensky.
They begin to prepare their society. That is very dangerous. I think that it's dangerous even to speak about it.
What Jake didn't play, though, is Zelensky recently calling on NATO to launch strikes on Russia. So Jake Tapper says that Zelensky is afraid of Russia using nuclear weapons after Zelensky explicitly called on NATO to use weapons against Russia. And that is the most fast-track way to ensure that Russia will use nuclear weapons, is if NATO attacks it. So Zelensky has been stoking this while also saying that he won't negotiate with Russia unless Vladimir Putin is overthrown.
Right,
so basically,
right.
Unless there's regime change, which is another way to usher in nuclear war.
Yeah. It's just absurd. And I wonder if part of it is just that the United States is so used to being such a bully that they're not really thinking through what they're doing. Or I guess it's just that the arms industry is so powerful and they're so, they're gaining so much through this war. That makes sense to me. But just the geopolitical cost of this seems so high.
I think that's a great point. They're so used to fighting people who can't really fight back. I mean, that's the reason why they invaded Iraq. They knew Iraq had no WMDs. They are used to going after countries that are relatively weaker, Libya, Syria. But in this case, Russia can fight back. And that's part of the reason why they want to overthrow Putin, is because, they were fine with Putin when he was playing ball with the US and trying to get along. But as soon as he gave a speech in 2007 at the Munich Security Conference saying that the age of US hegemony is over and things have to change and the US has to respect treaties and has to do things like stop expanding NATO to our borders, that's when all of a sudden Putin became an enemy and marked for regime change, just like anybody is when they don't go along with US orders. And that's why people like Jake Tapper, who strongly identifies with US hegemony, even if he doesn't know it consciously, are so emotionally hostile to people like Putin and get them to not even hear the actual words of what people like Putin say. Really
disgusting.
Well, congrats, Jake Tapper, on your new show, and we'll look forward to checking back in for more of your pearls of wisdom.
Yeah, your untied pearls of wisdom.
Untied, Jake Tapper.